Chapter 16 Mother of Death. We haven't spoken of our mother in quite a long time. We haven't even said her name. Guess there's a first time for everything. Her name was Crow Green, an average human girl. Long midnight locks. Just like me, with the darkest green eyes you've ever seen. Her rouge lips held a hidden kiss that only my father could unlock. She was the definition of beauty. She believed deeply in the gods, including the Grim Reaper. She used to pray to him every night, begging for a sign that he was real. My father grew fond of her cries and used to leave black feathers on her windowsill to represent the angel of death. She used to collect every single feather, binding them with a ruby ribbon. She kept that with her forever over time. Father plucked up the courage to visit the mortal, and their affection blossomed for each other each time they were in each other's presence. Crow grew pregnant one day and gave birth to her first son, Blake. Father told not a soul that his first son had been born as a demigod. At the time, having a demigod as an heir was deeply frowned upon. People are still bitter about demigods, but they cannot stop them taking over their godly parents' duty. Crow nurtured her son for 4 years. Father visited his little family in secret everyone's spare minute he had. After 4 years, Crow grew pregnant once again and I was born. My father had found himself with yet another demigod child. Eventually, the godly court found out about Father's family. At first, they found it strange that Death had a demigod as an heir. But then a prophecy came to pass one day. An angel goddess deemed to be our savior would team up with Death's heir. This would cause a destructive war to erupt between the supernaturals and the gods. Knowing that the heir was one of Father's kin, they came to accept us into their world. Crow decided it would be best if her children grew up surrounded by gods so that the prophecy would one day come to pass. So Blake and I lived in the underworld after my first birthday. Crow wanted to stay on Earth a little longer before she would join us. And Father granted her that wish as well of a year of peace as she required. She reassured him they would have all of eternity to be together. So he promised her a year of peace one day. My father received news from the fates. Crow was destined to die at his very hand. Father couldn't bear killing her. His affection towards her grew deeper each day. The fates warned him that falling in love with a mortal was dangerous. But he didn't listen. Instead, he visited her the day of her death, breaking their promise to explain that he would take her to the underworld to live with him. However, this would disrupt the balance of life and death. To save a soul, another must be reaped. That was our rule. The only problem was, Grim needed to find the perfect soul to take. Now, when messing with the balance of life and death, you realize that no two souls are the same, meaning everyone's was different. Crow's soul was dark, very, very dark. I suppose that's what you get for praying to the Grim Reaper every night. So yes, you could say my father was in quite a predicament. There was, however, a way to keep a soul without replacing it. That meant Father would have to grant Crow the ability to live forever. An immortal was what she needed to become. We all know my history with immortals, so I think you can guess what will be coming next. Father transformed Crow into an immortal by granting her life and death all at once. Only a Reaper can grant this gift. For the first few years it was great. Father loved the attention he received from her. And when she granted him a son, he couldn't be any happier. Crow had also granted him a daughter, and he couldn't be more pleased that he had his own family. My father had his little prince and princess with his queen alongside him. A Reaper couldn't ask for more. But that's when Mother began to dabble in black magic. That's when she grew tired of the same thing every day, watching Father reap souls and lead the underworld. She began to have an affair with a dark sorcerer. He promised Crow more than what my father could give her. So she left him and became a sorceress of black magic. She is now one of the most wanted people in the God's court. Her crimes are unbelievable, but worst of all, my father was left with a broken heart and 2 children. The fates warned him it could go wrong because, unlike gods, mortals have a free soul, which means they could do anything they wanted, whereas people like me have been allocated roles and what we need to do must be completed. However, demigods have more freedom. We contain a free soul within us. My mother is the whole reason I'm a demigod. And Blake. Demigods are considered more powerful due to them having the ability to live forever and their godly power, as well as being able to have a free soul. Which is why my brother abandoned his duty so easily. But unlike him, I vowed never to leave my father or fall in love. But I've already broken this vow. And it's that stupid immortal's fault, so here we are, shrouded in the deathly silence caused by my dear older brother. Soon my father decided to break this barrier of silence. Do not speak of her as your mother. She cannot even be considered as something of a mother, my father says. Irritatedly, well, like it or not, Dad. She did give birth to me, and Raven, Blake boomed back. I have a feeling I'm going to be involved in this soon. Raven, do you see her as a mother? My father asks me. I knew it. Why do I always have to be right? Well, the only motherly part one see in her is that fact that she gave us half our genes and brought us into this world. Other than that, she's a stranger to me, I say, crossing my arms over my chest, sighing. I really do hate family bickers. See, your sister agrees with me, my father argues. Suddenly a loud crash can be heard throughout the castle. Immediately we all turn our heads towards the sound. Soon an angel of death walks through the door with a panicked look on their face. Your Highnesses, an immortal has made their way into the underworld and are currently roaming around in the palace, the angel says, in a frightened tone. Well, what are you doing just standing there? Go and find the immortal, my father yells, ordering the angel of death away. We will continue this later, father says. Leaving the room, my ruby eyes fall onto Blake's. Looks like your little lover's here to save you, he says. Grinning at me, what I say, my eyes filling with fire. Save me, you're joking, right, I say. A scowl pursed on my lips. Oh, come on. Daddy's little girl is gonna take over the throne. That's a big responsibility, Raven, he says. A mischievous grin still plastered on his face. You brought him here, didn't you? I ask, astonished. But I receive no reply. I knew it was too good to be true. My brother comes back claiming to take my side. It was just his plan to distract me and my father. Indeed he did, a familiar voice says behind me. As I slowly turn around, I'm soon met with a pair of sterling blue eyes. Luke, I say under my breath. Hello, Raven. Chapter 17, A Demigod and Immortal. Grimacing at the monster before me, I spin back around, looking into my brother's now cerise eyes. My thoughts spun around my head. The biggest question of all taunted me until all I could muster out towards my brother was why. I couldn't understand it myself. Why go through all the effort to earn my trust, then lose it again? Because, Raven. Luke here has something to say, Blake announced, gesturing to the blonde-haired immortal standing behind me. Reluctantly, my gaze found his. Those arctic blue eyes that had once fooled me. Raven, listen to me, he begins. But just hearing his voice irritates me. I'd already heard enough, and when I found myself pushing past him towards the exit, a strong grip grabbed onto my shoulders, pulling me back in place. It was clear that Blake wanted me to hear what Luke had to say. I was wrong, okay? You're not a monster, Luke admitted. Why continue lying to yourself, Luke? I scoff, turning my face away from him. Blake removed one of his hands to reposition my face so that we both were looking eye to eye with each other. Why are you working with him? I moan, turning my head to look at my dear brother. Instead of an answer, he just turned me back so I was facing the immortal. I know I went a little too far, Raven. I know I hurt you, he says, composing himself. You hardly know anything, stupid immortal, I mutter loud enough for him to hear it. Blake began to sigh behind me. Clearly I proved to be more trouble to handle. Raven, please, I'm trying to apologize, Luke pleads to me, his eyes looking genuine. I look deeply into his eyes for a moment. The eyes that I long to look upon me in love. The eyes I long to look into every day. I shook my head immediately. He was tricking me with those eyes of his, making my thoughts fill up with stupid confessions of love. I don't need his love, and he made it very clear the day I turned back into a reaper that he would never love me. Blake let out a small chuckle behind me. Looks like my little sister hasn't lost all her true feelings for a certain immortal, he whispers into my ear. I sneer at just the words. I can't love Luke, it's not something I want to do. I don't want to be with him at all. I could hear other reapers in the hall shouting in the background. The immortals in the prince's room, your majesty, one reaper shouts down the endless corridor. I turned to look up at Blake, and I could see a look of fear plastered on his face. They had found Luke earlier than he thought. I grinned at this. Soon the reapers would barge in and arrest Luke for trespassing, and I would be able to leave to the coastal region to begin preparations. Luke, plan V, Blake orders to him. Luke humbly nods and barricades the door with various pieces of furniture inside Blake's bedroom. If you think that will stop them, "You're mad," I state proudly at the both of them. "Oh, I know it won't stop them, sister. But it will give us enough time to take you to Earth," Blake announced, grabbing a small piece of black fabric out of his pocket and bringing around my mouth, until I was no longer able to speak. "This is insane. I'm being kidnapped by my own brother." Blake quickly tied my hands behind my back before I could fight back, and as he attempted to tie my feet together, I brought my knee upright in between his legs. He let out a growl of pain once I did it and let go of my legs so that I was able to move them. I scurried along to my side that was leaning against the wall, thinking I could rub it against the rope binding my hands, but my plan was ruined when Luke grabbed me by the waist, swinging me over his back so that I couldn't run anywhere. Blake, back on his feet, walked towards Luke and finished tying my feet together. I was powerless. I couldn't speak to summon any reapers to my side. I couldn't use my hands to summon my side, and I couldn't even move my feet to run away. I tried my best to squirm around as I was balanced on Luke's shoulder, but that just made him tighten his grip on me until I couldn't even jerk my body at all. Looking in the mirror on the wall, I could see Blake nod towards Luke as he jumped out of the bedroom window. Luke hurried along to the open window and pulled me off his shoulder so that he was carrying me in both arms. I glared at him, but he just smiled sinisterly at me as he nodded below me and threw my body out the window. I knew I couldn't die. I was death. One of the only gods that couldn't die. I felt another pair of strong arms catch me, and I was greeted with a pair of cerise eyes. Blake had clearly stood under the window so that Luke could pass me on to him so that they could both escape to Earth. Blake soon swung me over his shoulder just as he twirled his scythe in the air to open a portal to Earth. I looked at Luke, who was running to catch up with him. He had a proud look plastered on his face, almost as if he had just become the most powerful man in the world. If he thought kidnapping me would do that, then he had another thing coming. Both of them jumped through the portal until I was surrounded with the familiar New York apartment I had dwelled in when I was stripped from my powers. Blake placed me onto the sofa in the small apartment, and the first familiar face I was greeted with was Luke's brother. He smiled as he saw me sitting there and placed a chair in front of me, so that Luke could take a seat in front of me, which he did. I was now being forced to hear what Luke had to say, and shockingly the first words that came out of his mouth was not a cry for sympathy or an apology. It was his pride talking. "You will never get my soul, Raven." Chapter 18: The Rebellion. Deciding that I couldn't stand looking at him any longer, I closed my eyes. I don't want to fall under his trick and his fake smile thinking he is perfect. He isn't. Luke is far from perfect. I need to get him out of my head. I wish I could just go back to being the Reaper who didn't care whose soul they took. I wish I could be that Reaper again. The only way I can do this is to completely isolate the whole reason why I've been straying from my duty. I need to do something about the monster sitting in front of me. Closing your eyes won't do you any good. You can still hear me, Luke says cockily. I don't care that I can still hear him. As long as I don't have to see his revolting face, he can let his pride talk all he wants. Raven, just listen, I made a mistake. And it was over a huge misunderstanding. I desperately wanted to scream out and say it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was Luke revealing his true colors. Luke, get to the point, Blake moaned. He too was getting tired of the immortals blabbering. Okay, the point is, Raven, I need your help after those words. I opened my eyes wide, staring at him in disbelief. He actually thinks I'll help him after how he treated me. That's a bold move for a coward. I'm in danger and only you can protect me. Blake abandoned his Reaper duty and is no longer able to wield his scythe. He used the last of his power to open the portal here, he states. Gesturing to my brother, I look into his cerise eyes. It's true, he's lost his power. I guess that's what happens to Reapers who stray from their duty. I've heard similar cases. Reapers going rogue, but I've never known the consequences to it. If you agree, Raven, just nod your head and I'll untie you, Blake tells me. I'm unsure of what I should do. I want to know why Luke's in danger, and I want to know why only I can help him, but I also want to know why I want to help him. There's a voice at the back of my head, telling me I should help him, but I don't know if I can trust him. There's only one way to find out. I nod my head towards the boy sitting in front of me. He gives me a grateful smile as my brother unties me. Rubbing my wrists, I take a deep breath in and out. It helps keep me calm. Why is she taking deep breaths? Luke asks my brother, looking down at the immortal. A sinister smile is plastered on Blake's face. He knows all too well why I do this. It stops her anger from bursting out, Blake says. Grimly smiling, Luke looks towards me. Fear locked inside his eyes. You're still angry? Luke asks me. Well, if being called a monster and being kidnapped by the person who treated you badly leads to anger, then I'm afraid I am more than angry at you. I'm furious, I state honestly. It's annoying how manipulative these two can be after all they did convince me to go along with their plan. Raven, I've already said. I interrupt him. Holding my hand up to make it clear I don't want to hear any of his pathetic excuses. Just tell me what's going on, I say, sighing as I slump into the back of the sofa. Blake swiftly takes a seat next to me and begins to explain the situation. A rebellion has erupted in the supernatural world, and King Bloodbrook has found out your ties with Lukey boy over here. He thinks that you two are lovers, which I also believe. I give him a grim look once he mentions our relationship. After I've done this for you, I want nothing more to do with him, I say, gesturing towards Luke. A look of sorrow flashes through his eyes to imply he was hurt by what I said. The best part of all was that I didn't care how he felt. Maybe after this I'll be back to my old Reaper self. Right, well anyway. Vampires are trying to rebel against the war by kidnapping Luke so that they can blackmail you to hand over Ally, or should I say Charmaine, after he reveals Ally's true identity. I slap a hand over his mouth. If you're forgetting, dear brother, no vampire on Bloodbrook's side knows Ally's true name, so if you kept silent it would be most appreciated, I finish, falling back onto the black leather sofa. Okay, I get it. Well, now you know the gist of it. He wants Ally urgently for some reason, Blake says, putting his feet up on the small wooden coffee table. I don't understand. I thought he wanted to kill Ally, I say, bringing my hand up to my face, rubbing my temples in confusion. He thought he wanted to kill her, but then he realized something, Blake tells me, wanting to know what the king realized. I eagerly tune into the conversation. If he gets Ally pregnant, she will become his for all eternity. This would also cause her to lose her angel side, and the vampire venom that is still inside her will fully take over, Blake says, a serious tone evident in his deep voice. That's when I realized something. Ally told me once that something happened between the two of them when she was drunk, and it appeared to be intimate. I hope she isn't pregnant, otherwise there will be no point to this war. Jamie storms into the room, a worried look on his face. Luke, I've seen an angel and demon out in the streets in our area, and they're heading this way, he says in a panicked tone. He didn't even need to identify who the angel and demon's identity was. I already knew that Leo was here, and assuming he went to find Ally. I also believe she's with him. This isn't good. If Charmaine is found in New York amongst the rebels, she may be in danger. Chapter 19, The Choice. The door began shaking on its hinges, and the person behind it was bashing their fists against the wooden door. Luke and Jamie's faces grew white with fear. Seems that the angel and demon followed Jamie as he tried to escape. Blake lets out a low chuckle as he watches the boys scramble to their feet and walk towards the back of the room. He's gonna kill me, I hear Luke say, stuttering with fear. He acts like he's untouchable, but once the Prince of Hell arrives, he acts weak. Open the door or I'll burn it down. Leo beams on the other side of the door. I look towards the boys, but none of them appear to be moving. Sighing, I walk towards the door and swing it open. Leo scowls at me, but once he realizes who he's staring at, his eyes soften up with shock. Raven, I hear Ally say from behind him. I glance her way, noticing the confusion in her eyes. Taking a quick glance back inside the apartment, Blake silently laughing at the boys cowering in the corner. Reluctantly, I decide to let the two inside. Why don't you two come inside, I say, stepping out of the way, allowing them access to enter. The two of them obediently follow my instruction and sit themselves on the small sofa in the middle of the room. Leo glares at Luke and Blake. Blake shrugs the glare off like it was nothing. However, Luke tries to escape into the other room. I stare at him, boring my eyes into his, gesturing for him to stay put. He doesn't move after that. I thought you were kidnapped, Ally asks. Staring at me, I look towards Blake, using my eyes to suggest that he should take over. Sighing, he begins to speak. She was. Blake begins. Was what do you mean? Was Leo angrily interrupts. Never get on the bad side of Leonardo Hellington. The son of Satan is not afraid to release all hell onto those who anger him. I've witnessed it happen in the past. We never heard from that poor soul again. Well, what do you think I mean, demon? Does she look tied up? My brother states, gesturing towards me. This just angers Leo even more. causing him to stand up and saunter his way over to my brother. Ally looks up at me concerned. I roll my eyes at the boys, deciding to take matters into my own hands. I summon my scythe to my hand due to it being left in the underworld. Once I click my fingers, the ruby scythe appears in my hand, raising it in the air. I swiftly pound it onto the ground, creating a great bang to erupt around the apartment. Leo and Blake look at me confused as I glare at the two of them. If you two could stop acting like children, it would be most appreciated, I beam, scowling at their immature behavior. Leo sighs as he makes his way back to the sofa to sit down. The reason we kidnapped Raven was because we needed her to agree with something, Blake announces. So you took her against her will and forced her to agree to your terms, Leo says, the anger in his voice becoming more evident. It sounded better when I said it, but yes, Blake says, sneering at the demon. Leo has never been too fond of my brother. In fact, he hated him. I can't blame him though. He did abandon me for 2 years to take over his duty, which I have become attached to, so he has no chance of getting it back. Let's not carry on talking about my issue here. Instead, perhaps some immortal would like to talk about theirs, I say, hinting to Luke to speak up. Leo folds his arms over his broad chest, sneering at Luke, waiting for him to speak up. Well, you see, Luke stutters as he speaks. The fear in his voice is evident, and I know that Leo likes it that way. Come on, immortal, spit it out, Blake shouts, getting tired of his antics. The Vampire King is after me to get Raven to hand over Ally, Luke says, shuffling about in the spot. Leo's eyes grow wide, and he begins to march his way over to Luke. What, Leo bellows, lifting Luke off the ground by his shirt. It's not my fault, Luke beams back in response, growing angry at the demon sighing. I swish my scythe in the air, causing Leo to put Luke down. He growls as he walks back to his seat next to Ally. Fighting isn't going to change anything, I say aloud, eyeing the boys to assure Ally that no more violence will occur. Well, what do you have in mind then, Leo says, huffing as he watches Luke fidget around in the corner. You're going to have to trust me, but I think I need to be turned into a mortal, I say. All of a sudden, all eyes are drawn to me as everyone stares at me in shock. No, Raven, I can't do that, Ally says, looking afraid. If I take your powers away, you will be left vulnerable, and don't you need to protect Luke anyway? I watch Ally's concern grow as she finishes what she needs to say. Bloodbrook has never seen my face. I've always been wearing my cloak whenever I've been near him. If you turn me into a mortal, it might convince him that Luke here has no business with death because he will be with a mortal woman, I say, looking into Luke's eyes as he gazes at me with confusion. Are you sure about this, Raven? What about Dad? How do you think he will feel? Blake says, his eyes changing from inconsiderate to sympathetic, the type of eyes a brother would have when concerned for their younger sibling. I'll need you to distract Father, Blake grins, meaning he agrees to my plan. Are you ready? Ally asks me, making her way towards me. I nod in confirmation. The choice has been made, I say proudly. Chapter 20, stripped from immortality. Ally stares into my eyes. A crystal tear forms in the corner of one of her sapphire eyes, slowly rolling down her rosy cheek. I knew she was doubting herself. I know she thinks she will fail me. Her gentle touch reaches me and a shock bellows throughout my body. My skin begins changing from its pale snow-like color to a peachy pink color, the type of skin that has blood flowing through the body underneath it. My clothes formed back into a familiar pair of black jeans, a red top hugging to my torso, and the all-too-familiar red stripe in the front of my hair. My scythe disappears, and along with it so does my brother. A heavy weight forms in my chest, and I gasp to the surprise of feeling the weight of my heart beating. Looking back up at Ally, I notice her tears flow more frequently. Once I adapt to my new body changes, I notice the sorrowful look in Leo's amber eyes. I gesture towards Ally, suggesting that he should take her back to Callum. Leo realizes what I'm suggesting and gently places his hands into Ally's small shoulders. She mouths a sorry to me, but all I do is smile at her. A red flame envelopes the two of them, and they disappear along with the flame. Jamie stares at me in shock whilst Luke appears to fetch some items from his bedroom. I hate to be a bother, Jamie, but would you mind grabbing me something to eat? I would do it myself, but I can't cook, I say, smiling at him warmly. Sure, Raven, Jamie says meekly, walking into the kitchen. I can tell he is shocked at how differently I'm acting. Once I was stripped from my Reaper powers, I felt the warm emotions return to me. I know I say a lot that Reapers don't have emotions, but what I mean by that is we don't feel sadness, joy, or love. We only feel anger usually. So I need to become accustomed to these new emotions because I have a feeling I will be experiencing them more than one would think. Luke returns back into the living room just as I decide to sit down. I picked up a few things for you the last time you were mortal, but I didn't have chance to give them to you because, well, you know, something came up, Luke says, sheepishly referring to the time we were kidnapped. He hands me a box and a cotton-lined jacket. Taking a closer look at the jacket, I realize that its black color matches my jeans, and I also notice that the jacket has gray stripes among it. Swiftly, I put the jacket on and zip it up, feeling warmer already. I thought you might like that jacket because of its dark colors and that fact that it has a hood, he says, referring to hood sewn on the back of the jacket. I firmly pull the hood up around my face, smiling gratefully towards him. I automatically become comfortable masking my face once again. It was the one habit of mine that I couldn't quite shake off. Looking back at the cardboard box in front me, I curl my fragile fingers around the edges of the box and swiftly lift it off and onto the table. Inside the box lays a pair of Converse that were a ruby color, coincidentally matching the ref top beneath my new jacket. I quickly place them into my feet, however they feel very loose. They feel like they will fall off, I say to Luke, looking at the flimsy show on the end of my foot. You haven't tied the laces, that's all, Luke says, bending down to my feet and smoothly tying both shoes into a neat bow. I'm just glad they fit, he says sheepishly, standing back up and admiring my new appearance. All of a sudden I stand up and wrap my arms around his warm body. The shock also came to Luke as he eventually hugged me back. I don't know why I hugged him, I just felt this urge that this would be a good way to thank him for all he had done. I hear a door swing open at the back of the room, and I hastily remove myself from Luke as he scratches the back of his neck. Jamie walks in holding a plate with a few sandwiches laying atop of the piece of china. He looks at the two of us and grins. I hope I wasn't interrupting anything, you two, he says, raising his eyebrows at the sudden awkwardness in the room. I smile gratefully to him as he hands me the plate. Eagerly, I sit down and swallow every sandwich that was on that plate. My stomach stops hurting as it becomes satisfied with the food that was consumed. So what do we do now, Luke asks, gazing out the window. Firstly, we need to be seen out in public together so that the vampires will realize you are with a mortal woman. If they are smart, they will back off, realizing that I would have nothing to do with an immortal that is together with a mortal woman anyway. Hopefully they will then back off from you, and I can continue preparations for the up-and-coming war, I say, stating what is needed to be done and why. That doesn't seem too hard, Luke says smugly. You also cannot think anything about this plan as vampires can read minds, which you should already know. You will also have to show affection towards me as vampires are not stupid, I say, gazing into his eyes with a serious tone in my voice. Luke nods, a slight tinge of red appearing in his tan cheeks. I felt my own cheeks heat up due to the fact that I will have to show my own affection towards him as well. I wonder if this plan will change me at all. Chapter 21. The plan begins. Today Luke and I are going out on the streets of New York for our date, to prove that Luke is not in love with death. However, things have already started to avoid the plan we'd set. I just think that today isn't a good day, Raven, Luke moans, browsing through the programs on his TV. I don't want to rush you or anything, but thousands of blood-sucking vampires are trying to hunt you down, and you feel like today isn't a good day to save your life. I ask, sarcastically, to emphasize the reason why I agreed to be mortal for all of this. Well, have you even taken a look outside? It's pouring with rain. We will probably catch a cold from that weather, Luke says, gesturing to the constant fall of clear raindrops, sliding down the murky glass window. I don't know if you've forgotten or anything, but as a Reaper, I spent most of my time in London, and guess what? The weather I experienced was mostly rain, so grow up and grab your umbrella, I announce, walking towards the wooden door. How could I forget? That posh accent of yours is so thick it's impossible to forget, Luke growls, slowly getting up and grabbing his blue umbrella from the side of the room. I'm not posh, I say grimly as I glare at him. You are Raven. As a princess, you grew up in a royal environment. That's also a nice way of saying you're a posh snob, Luke says, snickering at his own comment. I suggest you hold your tongue unless you want Bloodbrook to think you are in love with me, I state, daring him to detest me. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. Instead, he walks out the door in a huff in defeat. I smile as I follow after him, knowing that, even as a mortal, I was still better than him. The rain clouds up ahead seemed to release tears after tears of water down onto the streets of New York. The lights emitting off the various adverts was our only source of brightness throughout the dull streets. Due to me now being immortal, I couldn't sense any supernatural presences anymore, so if a vampire was near us, I couldn't detect them. Instead, I came up with an alternative idea. I got Leo to follow closely behind and text Luke if any vampires were near. I'm smart, I know. So if we're like dating, should we hold hands? Luke suggests, slightly turning pink at the cheeks. I suppose so. If that's what lovers do, I've never really experienced the emotion much, so I have no clue, I say, grabbing hold of his warm hand. He wrapped it around my smaller hand, and soon we began walking side by side, hand in hand down the streets. What's it like to not experience any emotion other than anger? Is it like impossible for a Reaper to love? Luke asks, confused at a Reaper's biology. Well, it's not impossible, otherwise I wouldn't be here right now. Back in the early centuries, Reapers experienced every emotion possible. The rules weren't so strict back then. Once Mother left my father, the rules immediately changed. Reapers were taught how to block all emotions apart from anger out of their minds. Reapers were told loving someone can be very dangerous, however it is not illegal, it is just very unlikely. No one wants to feel the heartbreak my father felt the day Mother left. We never speak her name to this day, I say. Flashbacks of my childhood suddenly come flooding back to me, shivering at the thought. I fasten our pace down the pathway, hoping to get these memories out of my mind. Wow. I never thought a god could have such a tough life, Luke says, looking down at the floor. Well, technically, I'm not a god, I say. Turning down a side street, aren't you? But you're the daughter of Death, right? Death's a god, isn't he? Luke remarks, confused. Yes, he is a god, however Mother wasn't. Due to her being immortal, it led to her children becoming demigods. This allowed us to have a free soul and alternatively become more powerful. However, I do not wish to have a free soul. I must follow my duty like any other Reaper, and I am expected to follow deadlines, I say, realizing that perhaps I don't have as much freedom as I would have liked. Luke stops walking, causing me to come to a halt. The underworld has some strict rules, Luke says, his eyes full of sympathy as he looks into my eyes. I'll manage, I say, trying to let a small smile creep onto my face. You shouldn't have to manage, Raven. You should be allowed to do what you want. Your brother told me that he abandoned his duty to be with the one that he loved. Yet you seem to deny your feelings for the one you love, Luke says, all of a sudden becoming very serious. I don't love anyone, so I don't have to deny anything, I announce, confused at what the immortal is suggesting. If that's true, then why are you here? Why are you protecting me, Raven? Luke asks me softly. It's true, I don't really know why I'm helping him. My heart just told me I had to do it, so I did. Are you suggesting I love you, Luke? I ask, looking into his soft blue eyes as he looks down at me with adoration. I'm not suggesting it, Luke says, simply you're not. I ask, confused. I'm not. Because Raven, if you didn't love me, you wouldn't let me do this, Luke says, and after those words, he pulls me close into his chest and I feel the touch of his soft lips on mine. He was kissing me. The worst part of all was that I was kissing him back. Is it true? Do I love Luke? Chapter 22 Mother returns. Luke's passionate kiss soon came to end when we both needed to come up for air. He leans his forehead against mine. A few crystal raindrops rolling down his forehead softly roll onto mine. I think this is what a human would call a romantic event. Being kissed passionately in the rain isn't your everyday task now, is it? Luke smirks down at me. I knew it, he says, whispering it into my ear, almost taunting me that he was right for once. Don't let your ego get bigger than your head now, I say, teasing him, straightening myself up. I bring my hand upwards to my lips. It was odd to think that a minute ago my lips were attached to his. The kiss still warm on my lips. Why did I want to cling to that warmth? I've been thinking about Luke a lot more recently. Just thinking about the kiss we shared moments ago made my cheeks heat up. Perhaps if I allowed myself to open up to my emotions instead of blocking them out, I could have a happy life. Just as these thoughts were making their way into my head, memories of the past pushed them away. Images of Mother leaving and my father being left heartbroken became very clear in my mind. I needed to block all feelings for Luke away. I don't want to end up hurt like my father was due to falling in love. Hastily, I take a step away from Luke. Looking down at me, I can see the hurt on his eyes. I turn to walk away when I feel his soft hand grip into my arm, spinning me around to face him. Why do you keep denying your feelings for me, Raven? You just proved to me that you loved me just as much as I love you, he says softly to me. I could already hear the confusion in his voice. I couldn't tell him why I was doing what I was. He wouldn't understand. Luke, do you even know what love is, I ask, looking into his eyes seriously. Of course I do, he says, his confusion growing each time I speak. Don't lie to yourself, Luke. When we first met, you practically said to me that you're a womanizer, I stammer, images of our meeting popping into my mind. I remember not caring about his relationships back then, but now that I think about them, I become hurt. What are you trying to say, Raven? Luke asks, shocked at my accusation. Luke, you're a playboy, you don't settle down. You don't know what love does to a person. It can leave them feeling worthless and unwanted and, worst of all, heartbroken. Don't you understand that? How can I trust you with my heart when you clearly fool around in Vegas? You admitted that to me, I say, feeling a warm tear roll down my face and splash onto the ground. I knew what I said hurt Luke just by looking into his blue eyes. He was confused and lost, and I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed time to think, so I begin to run away from him. I run as far as my mortal legs can take me and turn down a side street to let all my feelings out, allowing more and more tears roll down my cheeks. Raven, I hear Leo say from beside me. I feel his warm arms wrap me up in a hug. I softly cry into his shoulder, and Leo rubs my back soothingly. It's okay, Rave. I know how you feel, Leo says to me. He's right. He does know how I feel. He saw me go through my father's heartbreak. He knows what it's like to not trust someone. Even though the devil's son is annoying as hell, he's my best friend and knows and understands what I'm going through. I want to trust him, but I can't. I sob out, confessing how I truly felt. I pull myself away from Leo, not wanting to ruin his outfit anymore. You should go. Your father will send some demons after you otherwise, I tell him softly. He knows I want some time alone and immediately nods and leaves in a puff of red smoke. I lean against the wall trying to calm myself down. I hear a set of footsteps coming down the alley. This was it. Luke was here and I needed to confess everything. Hello, Ravenna, a familiar voice says from beside me. It was a voice I didn't want to hear for at least a century. I knew that once I looked to my side, I would see the woman who gave birth to me. Crow, I say in a dark tone. I will never refer to her as my mother. As far as I am concerned, she is a mother, yes, but not mine. I will either call her by her name or refer to her as a mother, making sure to never claim that she was the woman who gave birth to me. Now, Ravenna. I know how you feel towards me, but I am still your mother and I would like to be referred to as one, she says, looking at me sinisterly. You will never be a mother to me, I spit back at her. She can rot in hell for all I care. What she was doing here, I have no idea. I glare into her dark green eyes, straightening myself up so that she knows I am prepared to stab my guard against her. Look at you becoming mortal just to save a human. I'm shocked to my core, Crow says, grinning at me. I continue to glare at her as I speak. I can see that you're still into spying on us, then I say bitterly. You are my child, Ravenna. Why wouldn't I want to stay in touch with you? She says over-dramatically. Cut the crap, Crow. Why are you here, I ask, the dominance in my voice becoming more evident. Why are you helping a human, she asks, avoiding my question. She twirls a lock of her own black hair around her finger, absent-mindedly looking into my eyes. He's not a human, I grit through my teeth. It's not like I was lying. Luke was an immortal after all, just like Mother. Oh, I apologize. Why are you helping an immortal, she says, adding emphasis onto the word immortal. I didn't like her being here and she clearly understood this. It's none of your business, now leave, I order her. I want her out of my sight or I might just lose my temper. Oh my dear sweet Ravenna. You're not a reaper at this very point in time, meaning you are powerless against me. Unless you want your powers back, she says, taunting me as she holds up a red orb in her hand. She had my powers, how did you get them? I scream at her, taking a step back. Oh, don't worry. The girl who was holding them won't even realize that they are gone. She may feel different, but she was asleep when I took your powers back. Now allow me to return them to you, she says, raising the orb in the air and smashing it against the ground. A black smoke floats out of the smashed orb, circling around my legs, engulfing me inside the black abyss. My appearance began to change once again. The red stripe in my hair disappeared as the all-too-familiar pitch-black locks cascade down my back. My clothes returned to my normal Reaper attire. The black frilled dress I always wore appeared on my body. My silk midnight black cloak is immediately draped around my shoulders, masking my identity once again. I stare at Crow in disbelief. "Why would you do this to me?" I scream at her, coming to grips with my familiar transformation. Luke was now in danger. If any of Adam's vampires saw us together, surely one would have followed me and would now have certainly seen that I was Death's daughter. "Don't worry, child. Your precious immortal has already been taken into the vampire's custody," she says, announcing it as if it was nothing. "Are you being serious? Did you do something?" I bellow at her, the anger coursing through my veins. "I may have dropped a few hints," she says, smiling deviously at me all of a sudden. I feel my legs give way and I collapse onto my knees. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks once again. My feelings for Luke broke through the barrier I had put up myself. I cared too much about him, and finding out he was in danger broke my heart inside. It was all my fault. There, Ravenna. Let Mummy take you home," she says to me, grabbing my arm and forcing me to stand up. Crow sways her hand in front of my eyes, and all of a sudden I feel drowsy. Crow clicks her fingers and a man appears beside her. I slowly begin to slip in and out of consciousness. "What did you do to me?" I manage to stutter out. "It's just a sleeping spell, child. Mummy is going to take care of you now," she says. I feel a pair of strong hands lift me into their arms. It was clear the man she summoned was the one holding me. My heavy eyelids finally won the battle of me trying to resist the spell. My eyes now closed. I was getting closer and closer to becoming unconscious, but just before I finally gave into the darkness, I hear Crow say something. "Take her home, Rain." "I'm going after Blake next," she says to the man holding me. I knew straight away who Rain was. He was the dark sorcerer that Crow ran away with, and it appeared she was after my brother next. Chapter 23: Blake's Point of View. Raven has been mortal for a day now, and I have been doing very well at distracting my father into thinking she is down on Earth collecting souls. Father still doesn't trust me, but I can tell he is glad to have his son back. He hasn't pressed on the matter of my reason for leaving, because if he asks, he knows he will receive an answer he doesn't want. I have fallen in love, and I won't deny it. The girl I have fallen in love with has changed me. She helped me overcome my selfish needs, and was one of the reasons why I helped that immortal. Since Raven is busy down on Earth, I've had my powers reinstated by dear old Dad so that I could get back into the business. Dad sent me to the small country of Wales to collect someone's soul from drowning in the River Dee or something. All I know is that I will find the soul in North Wales. Leaving the underworld, I head to my destination. My jobs are usually very quick, so I grab the soul and send it to the underworld. I noticed the scenery was very beautiful, so I decide to stay and watch the sunset. I hear footsteps close in on me, but I don't worry about it after all. Reapers can never be seen on duty. "Blake, my son," I hear a familiar voice say behind me. A chill runs up my spine as I turn around and am greeted with the dark green eyes belonging to my mother. "Mother," I growl, gripping my scythe closer to me. "Well, that's an improvement. Your sister wouldn't even call me that," she says, laughing bitterly. "What the hell have you done to Raven?" I beam at her, pointing my scythe straight at her. Mother just tuts, pushing my scythe to the side. "You and I both know you have been out of the game for far too long to pose a threat to me," she says. "She's been observing us closely, I see." "You didn't answer my question," I say, demanding her to answer it. "Your sister is safe and is once again a Reaper," she announces. My eyes widen in shock. If Raven has her powers back, that must mean Luke has been taken captive by the vampires. "You were always my clever boy, Blake. I see you figured everything out," she says, her cold hands cupping my cheeks. I shove her away from me and she simply pouts at me. "Why are you here, Mother?" I say, showing my annoyance of her presence. "I'm here to collect my son, of course," she says to me, a serious tone in her voice. No, you lost that privilege when you left," I say, stepping away from her. "She may be my mother, but she lost all custody to Raven and I when she ran away with that wizard boy." I sneer at her as she takes a step closer to me. "Blake, come to Mummy like your sister," she says, opening her arms wide, thinking that I'd come running in her arms. I'm not a child, mother, I snarl at her as she pouts pathetically. You know, your anger reminds me so much of your father, yet your actions are very similar to mine, she says to me, sinisterly smiling. I look at her with confusion in my eyes. I'm nothing like you, I beam, taking another step backwards. The furthest away I am from her, the better. Oh, but you're Blake, my boy. You abandoned your duty just like I abandoned your father, she says, grinning deviously after every word. That's different, besides, I returned. I snarl back at her. Now hush, son. We're leaving, she tells me before I can retaliate. She grabs both my hands and a green smoke surrounds us. I look around me and notice I'm in a strange home with the interior coved in many dark shades of green. It reminded me too much of my mother's eye color. Beside me is a velvet sofa with Raven lying on it unconscious. Hurriedly, I rush to her side, cradling her sleeping body. I sneer at Crow as she smiles down at us. You said she was safe, I snap at her, looking down at my poor sister. Relax, it's just a sleeping spell. The girl wouldn't let me near her, so I put her to sleep. Don't worry, she will wake up soon, she says, grinning down at me as if she hadn't noticed her daughter was unconscious. You do realize that when she wakes up she won't think twice about bringing all hell on you, right? I say as threateningly as possible. She just looks at Raven and smiles. She's very powerful. It's one of the reasons why I brought her here, she says. Her smile not fading. That's when it hit me. I look up at her dark green eyes and realize what she had been plotting all along. I knew it just from the way she was looking at Raven. You're part of the rebellion, I beam at her, standing up and pointing my scythe at her. Haven't you ever heard the saying, curiosity killed the cat, my mother says, sneering at me. She sways her hand in the air, and my scythe is flung to the other part of the room. I snarl at her and run right at her. Just as I'm about to reach her, I freeze on the spot unwillingly. I look around and I am met with a pair of gray eyes. I knew just by the glare that wizard boy had come to protect his love. I told you, Crow, that I didn't want your children here, he says, glaring right at me. I glare right back, but my mother just lets out a sigh. We've been over the plan many times, Rain. I need the two of them in order to take over the underworld, otherwise how will you and I become completely invincible? My mother says, looking back at Raven. I follow her gaze and realize that my sister had begun to stir in her seat. That's when I managed to let out a snicker. Boy, would she be mad. Her ruby eyes flutter open. And straightaway she stands up, glaring at Mother. She notices my position and summons her scythe to her side. She twirls it in the air and I am released from the position. Crashing to the floor, I don't care though. I manage to grab my scythe and walk alongside my sister. We both glare at the couple in front of us. Crow. I hear Rain mutter, but she just simply smiles. Ravenna, my dear, you're awake, she exclaims, clapping both hands together. Raven gives her a look of disgust. She hates being called Ravenna, that's not my name. She beams, pointing her ruby scythe at Crow. Her eyes begin to fill with fire. The black in the middle of her ruby eyes began to swirl. This happens only when reapers are furious, and trust me when I say don't get on the wrong end of my sister. I copy her stance and point my black scythe at Crow. Rain brings his hand in the air, a green fireball glowing in his palm, but Crow quickly tuts and forces his hand down. We both know that now that my sweet Ravenna is awake, she is very well able to kill us, Crow says. Smiling at Raven, Raven's eyes bore into Crow's, intimidating me more than her. Suddenly a crash comes from the front of the house. All eyes turn to the direction of the noise, and standing before us is none other than Dad. Father, Raven exclaims, shocked at his arrival. Dad, I yell, as he aims his silver scythe at the two immortals in the room. 3 against 1 isn't fair, Crow cries out. She takes hold of Rain's hand. I'll be back, my sweet children, she says before a green mist envelopes them, causing them to disappear from the room. Dad looks at the two of us and sighs in relief. He looks at Raven with a proud gaze and turns to me. I thought I'd lose you again, he says, walking towards me and placing both hands on my shoulders. Don't worry, Dad, I'm far from gone, I say. Patting him on the back, he looks at me and sighs. Now how about you tell your sister and I who this lovely girl is, he says, pointing at the door. Raven and I grow confused and stare at the doorway in disbelief. A girl with brown curls enters the room and I immediately run over to her, wrapping my arms around her small body. I look into her big brown eyes and smile. Harriet, I say, my tone full of love. She smiles at me, attaching my lips to hers in an instant. I wanted to stay like that with her forever, but someone decided to cough in the background. I turned back to face the person who coughed and noticed it was my sister. Well then, an explanation would be really appreciated, Raven says. I nod and begin to introduce her to the beautiful Harriet, the girl who saved me from myself. Chapter 24: The Witch. Blake gladly decided to introduce us to the girl who he abandoned his duty for. I look into her big brown eyes and immediately sense something off. She looks at me and smiles. You must be Raven, she says in a soft voice. You must be the girl my brother chose over me, I say, returning the smile. Blake glares at me as I say that. I'm sorry, but how could he possibly think I'd be okay with the situation? Don't mind my sister. She's still grumpy from my disappearance the past 2 years, he says, continuing to glare his cerise eyes at me. Rolling my eyes, I turn to my father, and what is she? My father asks directly. He shows no sympathy in his face and just looks to and fro from the couple, his beady scarlet-red eyes looking right through the poor girl. She's human, Dad, he says in an obvious tone, as if it wasn't hard to detect. I huff and Blake looks directly into my eyes. What? He exclaims, confused. She's not just human, clearly, I say, sensing another supernatural presence. I look at Harriet closely, but she doesn't seem fazed by my stare. In fact, she joins in with my little staring contest, smiling as she went along. Sneering at the girl, I turn to my brother. Well, he begins to drag on his words, as if he doesn't want to tell father and I something. I cross my arms over my chest, intimating him with my strong glare. Harriet decides to interrupt. I'm a witch, she says. Smiling, I look at her in astonishment. Out of all the creatures on this earth, he chooses a witch. Doesn't he understand our past with witches? They summon demons and control reapers with their magic. Was she too controlling Blake? I aim my scythe immediately at her, and so does my father. Blake runs straight in front of our scythes and begins to shout. Bloody hell, she isn't going to hurt anyone. She saved me, Dad. Raven, she's the reason I returned. After he screamed out those words, my scythe fell out of my hand. Blake didn't come home to see his only sister. He came because some witch told him to. I feel embarrassed after thinking he might have returned to aid me in the war. The truth hurts. I turn away from him immediately, and I can feel his gaze bore into me from behind. He begins to mutter something, but I was too hurt by what had happened. Father looks at me with concern. Maybe some reaping would make you feel better, he politely suggests. I nod my head immediately. Reaping is my one true passion. It's what I feel most at home doing. Father slips a piece of paper in my hand, and I look down at it. I was collecting the soul of someone from Scotland named Charlotte. Apparently, she was a person full of herself, thinking every guy loved her when in fact they loathed her. I never feel bad about collecting these souls. Picking up my scythe from the ground, I'm almost ready to transport myself to Glasgow when Blake grabs my shoulder, turning me around to face him. I look at him deadly in the eye, the fire returning to me. I roughly shake his hand off my shoulder and scowl at him. Raven, please, I just got you back, he exclaims, a look of sorrow plastered on his face. I immediately scoff at his statement. Brother, you never had me back, I exclaim sinisterly. I pound my scythe to the ground, and I am surrounded within a small village in Glasgow. I find the girl trapped in a burning building. No one was coming to her rescue, nobody cared. Looking at the girl, it reminded me of my brother. He didn't come to my rescue when I needed him. He didn't care. Sneering at the girl, I realized that her life must have been led to be horrible because her personality was appalling. As the flames engulf her body, I swish my scythe in the air, collecting her soul and sending it to the underworld. I knew that where she would be headed wouldn't be a happy place. I find myself wandering throughout Scotland, and soon I end up sitting beside Loch Ness, watching the calm lake reflect the full moon in the sky. Sighing, I look at my own reflection in the crystal waters. This was the face of the victim, the one that had been betrayed. My whole family has betrayed me at least once now. I can forgive my father because he was trying to protect me, but I cannot forgive Crow and Blake. They hurt me deep inside, and whereas trust can be easily formed, it can also be shattered within an instant, making it a lot harder to mend. I could no longer trust my brother. Deciding to get off the thought of family matters, I realized I needed to come up with a plan to get Luke back to safety. It's my fault he was captured. It's now my duty to bring him home. First things first. I need to give Callum some instructions. Transporting myself to London. I appear inside Callum and Ally's home. I find Callum in the kitchen cooking whilst Ally has fallen asleep on the sofa. Quietly, I enter the kitchen and Callum immediately notices me. Confusion furrowing his brows. Callum, I need you to keep Ally within this house at all times. Adam has the upper hand, and in order to stop him, I can't let Ally interfere. Can you do that for me? I ask him, keeping my voice low to not wake the goddess up. Of course I'll protect her, he says, smiling. I knew he was worried underneath that smile, but as long as he keeps her inside the protection spell on this house, they will be safe. Abruptly, I leave and make my way back to the underworld, thinking that I'd be the only one there. I entered my dark chambers to find a girl sitting on my bed, which I beam staring down at the girl on my bed. Hello, Raven. I don't believe we formally met last time, Harriet says, smiling up at me. She's messed with the wrong demigod today.